So we got Justice Kennedy as a swing vote. He's still going to be the swing vote because, you know, if we have Justice Gorsuch replacing Justice Scalia, they'll vote the same way. It's the same balance on the court, right? But we now have, people are working really, really hard on trying to come up with a standard. And they know what Justice Kennedy's looking for, because he keeps handing back the homework assignment and saying, do it again, and try this, and try that, right? And so they're trying to do exactly what he's looking for. So Nick Stephanopoulos teaches election law at Chicago. He has this idea, it's called the efficiency gap. And it's a way to measure in one number all of those packing and cracking decisions, right? So we were packing and cracking voters when we were drawing those maps, right? We packed a lot of, when you pack a lot of voters together, they're gonna win, but they're gonna win by a landslide, by an unnecessary number of votes. They're kind of wasting some of those votes. They don't really need it, right? When you crack voters, they're gonna lose, and so they're kind of wasting their votes in that way. And the idea was, let's count up all of these different wasted votes for each party, and then look at the difference in how much they're wasting their votes. And let's try to have a measure of how efficient the two parties are at turning votes, popularity, into seats, power. And it should be just as easy for either party to turn popularity into power, right? It shouldn't be a lot easier for one party than another to turn votes into seats. And so he came up with this measure, and they filed a lawsuit in Wisconsin saying this is a really high gap. It's so much easier for Republicans than Democrats to turn votes into seats because of the way you're moving people around and manipulating stuff. All of these cases go straight to a 3-judge federal panel with direct appeal to the Supreme Court. And for the first time in 30 years, in a case called Whitford versus Gill, decided 2 weeks after the election in November. People weren't paying attention to it because the election had just happened. For the first time, a court said, this is a political gerrymander under this legal test. And right now, Wisconsin is appealing it to the US Supreme Court. And this guy, Nicholas Stephanopoulos, he's working with the lawyers, filing all the briefs and litigating it. So he developed the standard, and now he's actually making the arguments to the courts. Now, they filed another lawsuit, and this is, I'm coming back to the lawsuit in North Carolina. This is called Rucho. Rucho's the guy who runs elections in North Carolina. And it's called Common Cause versus Rucho. That's the way it's being listed. But it's actually 2 different cases together. One, it's Common Cause suing. The other, it's the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. And it's the League of Women Voters of North Carolina that are making the same efficiency gap argument using the same test that's been proposed in Wisconsin. Now, the North Carolina case is not as far along. They haven't had a trial yet. The question was, are we going to have a trial? Is there enough here to have a trial? And the court said, yeah, there's enough to have a trial. And they're moving towards the trial stage. And actually what they're moving towards is what North Carolina doesn't want, which is discovery, depositions. That's when lawyers get to ask them questions like, hey, why'd you draw the map this way? And so now everyone who drew the maps in North Carolina have to swear under oath and answer some questions about how they drew the maps. When it comes to gerrymandering, when legislators start explaining what they were doing, it doesn't go very well. Right? They say some crazy stuff, right? They say stuff like, we are in the business of rigging elections. So that's a quote from a legislator that Justice Kennedy cites in his opinion, right? So this is on its way to the Supreme Court, and I'm writing a paper about whether this is the right legal test, and I'm hoping to submit it today. And I regret to tell you that I don't think it's perfect. I really don't. I think it's got problems. And I'm going to sum up for you in like 2 minutes what my analysis is. And then if there's any time for questions. Okay?
Yeah.
So here's the basic idea. I think here's what's going on. I think that electoral districting, the question of how to draw these districts, and the question of gerrymandering, there's fundamentally more than one factor going on here. Because, you know, a democracy, there's more than one thing that matters, right? What does it mean to have a healthy democracy? Kind of like if you ask, what does it mean for a person to be healthy? It's hard to describe a healthy person using one number. You might want to know more than one thing about that person in order to decide whether they're healthy. And so you might want to know more than one number about an election in order to know if you have a healthy democracy, right? I think fundamentally, it's a multi-dimensional problem. There's more than one thing going on. Justice Kennedy wants one number, because he wants a simple standard so that the courts can just go, boom, that's the answer, that's it. And that's exactly what the efficiency gap has tried to do. And because it's one number, it's focusing on one aspect of democratic health, but it's ignoring other aspects of democratic health. And specifically, the factor it's focusing on is, is there fairness between Democrats and Republicans? Right? And that's an important thing. We don't want there to be extreme unfairness between Democrats and Republicans. But I'm afraid that the way that it's doing it, I can draw a map that will satisfy this legal test, and I don't like the map at all. Can I tell you how I do it? I draw a bipartisan gerrymander. Do you know what a bipartisan gerrymander is? I draw districts so that the Democrats win some, Republicans win some, and they win, you know, a fair number between the two of them, so it's kind of fair between the two parties. And every single district is an extremely safe district for the incumbent candidate. So it carves up the jurisdiction, it doesn't favor Republicans. It doesn't favor Democrats. It favors the incumbent. Right? And it does it in a funny way that I think produces some really wacky results. That's me summing up my paper. The paper's much longer. But that's my concern. My concern is that I think that it's a useful measure. I think sometimes it picks up on a really big problem when one party is really being treated unfairly. But I think that's not the only issue that's involved. I think that there's also, I personally value competitive elections, where we actually have pretty close results in each election. Because I think when you have competitive elections, people get more involved, more people actually show up on election day and vote. Candidates don't take for granted that they're going to just win all the time, and so they actually try to think about, am I doing a good job? What's my record, right? And I'm afraid that if you have if you carve up your state into bipartisan gerrymanders, you will satisfy this test. But then what will happen is that the general election won't matter anymore in any district. Because you're going to have some blue districts where the Democrats are going to win. And you're going to have some red districts where the Republicans are going to win. And they're going to have some proportion in the legislature. You know, Republicans will get some of the seats. Democrats will get some of the seats. But then who are actually those candidates going to be? They're going to be chosen at the primary level. In the primary process, when you're choosing those candidates, and that election, not a lot of people show up for those elections. Sometimes you can't show up for those elections, as we know in Idaho. We've recently changed the rules so that Democrats can no longer vote in the Republican primaries, right? And so in any safe Republican district in Idaho, the candidate's going to be chosen not by all of the people in the general election, but just by the Republicans in the primary election. And the Republicans that show up in the primary election are the most extreme Republicans. And the Democrats that show up in the Democratic primaries are the most extreme Democrats. They are the outliers. They're the people who are not the average people, because they're actually showing up on the primary and trying to influence the party, right? And so you will get fairness in one kind of funny way, but you'll get a legislature that will have a lot of extreme Republicans and a lot of extreme Democrats. And in some sense, the two parties are being treated fairly, but in another sense, the people are losing out. That's the heart of my analysis. And so I always hate doing these talks because I end on this real downer, right? Because I'm like, there's this horrible problem, there's this great solution, and it's not going to work. And so people keep asking me, what do you think the solution is, right? And so this is what I'm working on next. I have a little bit of an idea. I'm not saying it's a silver bullet, but here's my idea. I think that maybe part of the problem is that, so if we're going to have districting, let's have districting, fine. But I want to make these districts a little softer. And here's my idea. You take the boundary of a district, and you let some voters kind of cross over sometimes. Specifically, if you live really close to the boundary between two districts, choose which one you want to vote. I call that soft districting. I haven't written it up yet. I'm still working on it. But here's what I like about it. I have no idea what's going to happen. And neither will the map makers. Nobody will know what's going to happen.
Can you do any kind of modeling?
I'm starting to work with folks at the university, and it's in the geography department, right? And it's in the statistical department. And I think what you're going to get is more competitive elections, but it's also, I think that it might address gerrymandering because you can't gerrymander. If you try to pack a voter over here, they'll just go back and vote. So that's my idea. It's at a very early stage. Pardon me?
They could change depending upon every election. So at one election, I can vote over here.
Yeah. Hey, you want to get crazy? Let's see how people. Let's let people choose their districts, and then redraw the districts based on what people want. It's kind of funny, right? Districting is the most powerful decision made in our elections, and citizens have very little control over it, right? And we are so obsessed with the individual right to cast a ballot. Why don't we get a little more interested in having more of a say in what districts we're assigned to, right? So instead of map makers assigning us to districts, how about we choose our districts? That's my idea. Now, it's a little bit of a crazy idea, because if you let everybody choose any district, kind of all hell breaks loose, and my models aren't working out. It's not working out. And maybe there's no one silver bullet for this problem, right? But you know, the only thing that I think that if there's one map maker and the districts are hard and they perfectly assign everybody to a district, it is too easy to manipulate things and too hard to try to stop it. Which is why I think that maybe we need to stop having one person or one map maker draw those lines and have that much power. That's all I got. Okay. I can just hang out and chat if people have questions after.
So I think we need to just officially end the meeting now. We have an announcement.
We have, the League of Women Voters adopted a position on redistricting at the convention in 2016, and there's some copies of it over on the bar over there.
So those of you that want to
Help
get
yourself.
involved, that's a good thing to take. So Benji is willing to stay around and answer questions, but those of you that need to leave can go now. And I did forget to say that Benji is an associate visiting professor in the College of Law. Are you going to stick around?